Yeah? All right. So I'm going to start with the first question to Mrs. Paola Fontel. Mrs. Fontel, can you introduce a practical example from the Nordic Ecodesign program that could inspire stakeholders in Korea and beyond?
Okay, thank you for the question. Of course, if you ask me, I would think that kind of a whole program would be very much applicable also to Korea, because from a business perspective, the issues and challenges and opportunities are quite similar regardless of the region, although of course we have regional differences as well. So definitely I would hope to see a lot of collaboration and exchange of experiences at this level as well. But I think if we then move on to kind of company level and what the companies have been developing during the program, most of those are quite kind of business confidential, because the businesses have been developing their new product concepts to be launched sometimes later in the future. But quite many of them were focused on, for example, closing the material loops and building their own take-back systems for their products and textile products back from the consumers, and how to utilize that for deepening the customer relationship, and how to kind of offer something meaningful for their customers. So that sort of concepts were quite popular and common among the companies who were working in the program.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your insights. That was very interesting. Mr. Jong, based on your experience, what are the biggest challenges for Korean companies preparing for the new EU sustainability rules? You get it? Okay.
네.
Yes, some companies are preparing to respond to the new EU sustainability rules. Well, during my presentation, maybe I was being too extreme. Some companies are making rapid preparations. I think Hyo-sung talked about it as well, but when it comes to an ecosystem, just because one side is created, it does not mean that it's complete. That's how the structure is when it comes to an ecosystem. So if products, technologies are being developed, we need to also think about policies for collection, sorting, the administrative basis, and also we also need an infrastructure. However, some parts are lacking. So I don't think I can explain one by one for each of the companies, but not only Hyo-sung, but also some companies are making preparation to respond to eco-friendliness or ENC. They are giving a lot of thoughts. However, we need to put more effort in creating the overall ecosystem, because when it comes to an ecosystem, it's all about collaboration. That part is lagging the most.
Thank you very much. Maybe Mr. Che would like to add something about that topic. Can we pass the mic to Mr. Che, please? Thank you.
Yes, let me talk from the perspective of the industry, a private company. So when an ecosystem is already created, it will be easy for a company to enter into that ecosystem. But to go into details, when it's already there, it means that the relevant competitiveness, which means profitability for private companies, is already proven. However, for private companies, if it's something that they're trying new for the first time, it's not going to be easy for them to be validated with their profitability. So the managers and for the producers like us, those companies, we will have to enter even though we know that such ecosystem is not created yet. So that will be working as a barrier or hurdle for us. So the government level or an overall regulation or support must be there. Only then we will be able to join and move on. So again, when it comes to an ecosystem, my message is that the government's regulation or the support should all be there. Only then we will be able to create an ecosystem, and then a lot of private companies will be able to join in that ecosystem.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Che, you can keep the mic because the next question is for you. Hyoseong TNC is a leader in textile innovation. What should policymakers and business leaders prioritize in the next 2-3 years to accelerate the shift towards circularity in textiles?
굉장히 어려운
That's a very difficult question.
Take your time.
So again, as I mentioned earlier, in order to create an ecosystem, that will need a lot of support or assistance. And when it comes to that support, we need to come up with a motivation so that people can use those created products and relevant policies. And in that sense, I would like to emphasize that EU's Ecodesign or DPP, Digital Product Passport, if it's being promoted more fast and more with a lot of clarity, then that's going to give us quite a lot of motivation to move on and also to create a required ecosystem. However, it seems that we're not fast enough. And that is why probably a lot of companies in the industry are reluctant rather than being decisive.
Thank you very much for your answer. I will pass now to Mr. Scalia. Mr. Scalia, you mentioned 16 legislations directly impacting textiles that are now in the making in the EU. How is the European industry responding to that?
Well, the industry is concerned because 16 legislation brings a lot of changes. And in difficult times, economically, you're not sure how these changes impact on your business. Also, I fully agree with Mr. Che, what he said. Legislation can, and there is almost sometimes a balance that you need to find between going fast, but doing the right choices. So there is a lot of curiosity, for instance, on the digital product passport. How much it's going to cost to an SME? This is one of the major questions. What are the benefits that it will bring to me? These are the questions we want to solve. I would say the good thing of having so much legislation happening is that it can help you in making the right choices because full pictures. For instance, if you want to devise recycled material use, and at the same time you work on digital product passport, you can see how you can exchange data on. So in essence, the industry is overall committed in supporting the transition. Legislation, if properly done with the right objectives and concrete technical details, can help us. And I think it's also an opportunity for our industry to provide the answer to the question that you ask, which takes a lot of time to find the answers. But it's not a legislation which is down. You need 2 years, just do it. It's an industry based on the lessons learned, for instance, on the project, on recycling of spandex, as we heard, or many others. We can learn what would need to be fixed to the policymakers. I hope that answers your question.
That was very good. Thank you very much. Well, I may ask you one more, then follow up on the previous question. How is the legislation going to impact on the Korean and global value chain then?
So I think it's not a coincidence that we hear a lot about DPP here in these 2 days, because that's probably one of the major impact. So I repeat what I mentioned before, to make a digital product passport, every brand needs data from the supply chain. So that's certainly, I guess, impact number one. We saw before how we import €1 billion worth textile products from Korea. Some of that ends up in garments. We will have to get data also from Korea in these regards. We heard yesterday how interests are on DPP also from other world regions, China, Japan, US maybe. Is this DPP, which is going to be the first legally introduced in Europe, going to give ideas or maybe impact, maybe the technical standard we use, maybe the solution we find? So this is certainly something will have an impact in at least part of the value chain in Korea. Second point, if there will be a request for recycled content, that's also an impact on the investments to be made on recycled material. Whether it's in Korea, Vietnam, or especially in Europe, even from Korean companies. Maybe third point, we also talk about life cycle assessment. I repeat, we believe we need one harmonized methodology to measure the sustainability of products and the footprint. So that is quite advanced in Europe because we've been working for many, many years. It's still not final and is open to improvement. For instance, you mentioned microplastic before. That's also something that will be considered in the next review of the product environmental footprint methodology. So it's very likely that this methodology, because we will be using legislation, might also be considered in other legislation which comes afterwards.
Thank you very much. We're going to now move through the generic question for all our speakers, so you're all invited to answer to this question. If we want the textile industry to truly become more sustainable, what do you think is the one condition or shift that still needs to happen either in policy, supply chains, mindset, or in collaboration? Maybe we can start, maybe Mr. Scalia, you have the mic.
I think that everybody will play his part in this transition without necessarily one part of the value chain ask more to the other one. Consumer starting from consumer, shall be interested in sustainability and ready to pay €1 more, for instance, for a product if it's more sustainable. Evidence does not show that. Now the cheapest prices, the cheapest product are the ones which sell the best, not the most sustainable one. So that is what change. Brands and retailers need to create a demand for the manufacturing part of the value chain because you can make all sorts of investments, but if no one wants to buy it, it doesn't succeed. And also the manufacturer needs to take chances, to make risks, to provide solutions for the brands and also for the market, for the authorities through green public procurement. So in essence, everyone from consumer to authorities to brands to manufacturers have to play a part. That's perhaps one consideration from my side.
Thank you very much. You can pass the mic maybe to Mr. Che or Mr. Jong.
Sorry.
So when he was talking, I've been giving some thoughts myself. So rather than trying to think it as something optional, well, Korean textile industry is, as I mentioned earlier, in overall, we focus more on export to secure the finance and try to utilize that finance on developing technologies and again try to export that product. So once again, it's not good if we do it. It's not something optional, it's something mandatory for our survival. It's not a matter of choosing. So in the year probably like 2027 or 2028, if Europe gets started with its DPP, the impact on Korea is never going to be small. We're going to have to transform everything, including the systems, our mindset, marketing, recollection. Everything will have to go through a very big change. So it's really closely related to trade barriers and so on. So it's not something like nice to have, it's something we must have. So during the COVID-19, back then, we were all isolated. We had to keep our social distances. So we had to go through a lot of unexpected like home trainings at home. We had a lot of transformation on our lifestyle. We had digital meetings. And even though we did not want to, once we tried it, we became familiar with such lifestyle to some extent. And everyone gradually become adapted to such changes. So just like that, our changes in our mindset and circular economy leading to the recycling of textiles, impacting the economy, operating everything based on that, well, it's going to require quite a lot of changes, but the regulations or changes in policy that's going to speed it up. I think we need that something which is going to speed that up, and I believe that's something that we're all curious about. Is that going to happen like 10 years later, 20 years later, or 1 year later very suddenly? And if we do not adapt ourselves, we're going to lag behind. Is that going to be the case? So the people who are taking the lead, who want to be proactive, the companies, universities, research centers, all the institutes who are being proactive will wish such change to happen faster. And well, for me, I personally wish that circular economy and recycling is something good. I want that change to happen faster. And as Director Scalia has mentioned, we should change our mindset so that it's going to be a mandatory thing, not an optional thing. That's what I wish for personally.
Thank you very much. And we'll hear now about Mrs. Paula Fontel on that question.
If I think about the textile sector and sustainability overall, we heard in today's presentations something about the environmental impact of the industry. And to tackle those issues, I really welcome the Ecodesign for Sustainable Products regulation, because up to 80% of products' environmental impact is determined in the design phase. And that is why I believe that this ESPR will be very fundamental, because in Europe we have been working on sustainability of the textile sector and other sectors for centuries, already, and still we have those very big environmental problems. So I'm really hopeful that this initiative will help solve a lot of the environmental challenges that the sector has. But of course, I guess it's a bit of the same with the social sustainability. There are still some problems in the value chain, so that should not be forgotten when we talk about circular economy. It needs to be also socially sustainable. And thinking about the different kind of actors in this future circular system, or who are needed in this transition, I really believe that the brands and producers who are designing the end products have a very crucial role, because we need to have the demand for all these more sustainable alternatives, textiles and fibers, and what are being developed at the moment. But of course, the legislation will also drive the demand, I believe.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to all our speakers for taking time to share their thoughts. We will now pass the mic into the audience. Does anyone have a question? Yes, over there. Maybe we can pass the mic. Thank you. Oh, is it working?
My name is Sangmin Song. I'm with the Korean news outlet called Newstree. I have a question for Mr. Scalia. Thank you for your talk today, by the way. You mentioned about the importance of harmonizing data with all the countries and all the stakeholders for the digital product passport. I was just wondering, since there are a lot of stakeholders for all different countries, all agencies and the customs people, do you actually see this happening until 2028?
Maybe we can give the mic to Mr. Scalia for answer. Yeah. Is it working?
Yes, okay. So time-wise, it was also something that I think was mentioned in one of the previous interventions. The plan is to finish the legal text by 2026, roughly. Then there will be 18 months for the business, for the supply chain to adapt. So by the time that legislation takes the final decision, until the time the companies have to comply, there will be at least 18 months. Now we expect this to be even more, because you always have some technical times between the decision being taken and the legal text to be published in official journals. So at least I think it's going to be kind of 2 years. Plus, if need be, we might ask even additional time. Then there are two aspects to consider: the IT part and the content. So when it comes to the IT infrastructure, the work should be finished this year. So we should know which standard will be used to communicate what in the digital product passport, and that is going on. When it comes to the supply chain to be ready to use the contents, that is a difficult part. What we think is that probably the digital product passport will start with the minimum amount of information. That's actually what we ask the European Commission. Say, we need to make it work. You cannot ask any company to provide thousands of data on thousands of chemicals for thousands of products made every week. It's not going to work out. So let's start baby step, and let's see how it works. For instance, the durability of the product, or some specific chemicals which are already regulated. Therefore, conclusion, if we have at least 2 years and we have an IT infrastructure that is already available, and we start with some small contents, in principle, it could be possible. I have used if. So in theory, I think it's possible. And it's a matter for the policymaker to decide what is the level of ambition, which doesn't mean I want to go low on ambition, but I want to be realistic. And that's my last consideration. The wind of change in Brussels when it comes to legislation. The time of the very ambitious legislation that has to be changed afterwards, I think it's finished. Because they did in the past years, they made ambitious legislation due diligence, when you get to the data from the supplier of your supplier of your supplier, and then they change 6 months later. They call it omnibus. So now the attention on how actually we're going to make it for real is higher. And this is give us some confidence that we're going to try to make it work in 2 years' time. I hope the answer.
Thank you very much. Maybe we have time for just one last question from the audience, with a very short answer under 2 minutes from the speaker, please. Is there one last question? No? All right. If there is no more question, then we are wrapping up today's session.